Welcome back to episode 7, everyone, and we're moving now into part 2, which is all about converting between data types. So let's head on in to SQL Server Management Studio. Alright then, here we go. Let's change our database and we're ready to roll. So, first of all, we're going to look at the cast function itself. This is another built-in function. Thankfully, SQL Server provides that to us. And all we're going to do is simply cast this field here from our sales customers table, which is a datetime2 format of data type, and we're just simply going to turn it into a simple date. All we need to do then, similar to all the other functions we've done, enclose it in brackets and off we go. So this will simply transfer that from a datetime2 into a date. Let's have a go. Let's see what happens. And there you have it. So there's the format for a datetime2, and here it is for just the date. So all it's doing is stripping out the time component. You can see as we go down, it looks like it's all 00, but as we get further down, we see some other time components creeping in there. So all it's doing is taking the date part out of this and returning just the date to us, which is probably a lot more useful than having to mess around with these times here. So that's all casting does, is it converts between data types where it can. Now obviously you can't cast this as an integer, for example. Say we wanted to cast it as an integer, because the format is just simply not compatible. So it'll give you that error there. But as a date, it's just fine. Some other ways to cast then, if for example we have this integer here, which looks like it's a year 2020 and it's month 01 and date 01, so that's effectively the 1st of January 2020. If we wanted to cast that as a date, we first need to cast it as a character string. So you can use varchar or simply char there. It's got 8 characters. Simply cast it as a character string, but then we need to do our second cast, which is casting it as a date, as you can see here. So you can wrap your casts around each other, as you can see here, just to make sure you get your end data type that you're looking for. So that's simply casting an integer firstly as a character string, and then you can cast it as a date if, of course, it's compatible. So you can also cast it as a date time. Now date time has the time factor along with the date, so we can do the same thing. Now although there's no time on that, it will simply add a 000000 onto the end of it as the time. We'll see that when we run the code off. And then of course you can cast that string as a date straight away, and SQL Server is intelligent enough to know that that specific format is the year, month and day, similar to what it's just done up here, casting that as a string. All it does is it changes it to that, and then it can cast it as a date. And there are several different ways that you can write the date. You can have it here as with slashes. You can do it the other way around as well, where you put the day, then the month, then the year, and you can even type it out. So you've got June, you've got spaces there, you can even put dashes, 3 letters for the month, and you can just put 20 as the year, so that will assume it's 2020. Pretty straightforward stuff. Many different ways of casting a string as a date. Let's see what we get when we run this off. So as you can see, it's converted that to a date format. In fact, it's converted all of them as a date format, and this is the format that SQL Server stores dates as, which as you can see there's the year dash month dash day, and when you convert anything to a date it'll store it under that format. We've got our date time. As you can see, it's put zeros in for the time there, out to a few milliseconds as well. So you can simply convert a date into a date time, and it'll just add in those zeros there, so that'll be midnight on that day there. That's casting as dates, and different ways you can do that. Pretty straightforward and very, very versatile to cast it as a date. Now what about casting different values into integers, etc. Let's have a quick look at this bit of code here. So we've got the purchase order ID, and then we've got a supplier reference. Now as you can see, some of these have got alphanumerical characters in them, some of which have just got digits, numbers, etc. Some have got quite a few letters in them as well. So say you wanted to just find out and return supplier references which are only numbers. For example, this one here. Now this one here, although it looks like a number, if it has a 0 in the front, and then it's stored as a character string. So that'll be a varchar in this column. And you'll see when we hover above it, it's stored as a varchar. So what if we wanted to convert them to numbers? Let's have a go. We'll try to cast that as an integer. When we run that, we get an error because it's trying to convert a value with a letter in it to data type int, and it simply can't do that. Fortunately, we've got a method to deal with these sort of situations where we simply type in try underscore cast, and we have our bit of code there. We want to change that varchar column there into integers where we can. Let's have a look at that code, and there you have it. So if it cannot convert it, instead of coming up with an error and stopping the run of your query, it simply puts a null because it cannot convert that to a number due to the fact it has a B on it. Now it's managed to do that one just fine, and of course the next one where it started with 0, it stripped that initial 0 out and just had the integer value in there, and so on down the rest of the list. Pretty straightforward. So anything with a alphabetical character in it, it couldn't convert it to an integer, so it simply just put null in there, and it did that the whole way down the table there. So you can cast and you can try cast, and I've used cast constantly in a variety of situations. I'm regularly doing that, especially casting as a date, where you want to strip out the time component and simply have a date in there. And of course, try cast is supplied when you need to make sure that if it cannot cast it, it simply puts a null and continues with the rest of the code. It's pretty handy bits and pieces, a few good functions for you to use there. So let's have a look at this little scenario then. So following on from the work you've been doing with the ecom team, while loading customer data into the website, the load keeps failing as the valid from and valid to dates on the website are of a date type only. So what you need to do then is to write a script bringing in the customer ID and customer name from the customers table, along with the valid from and valid to date times converted to dates only. So if you want to give that a try, pause the video, bang out some code, and when you're ready, we'll crack on with my answer. Let's begin then with good old select star from, and we're going to look down, we're going to grab our customers there. and of course we're simply after the customer ID and the customer name. Let's bang those in quickly. That's what they're after. And then we're after the valid from and valid to. Date times. Let's copy those in. Very nice and easy. So what they're after is these valid to and valid from times converted or casted from a date time to into a date. So let's try our cast first of all. Copy and paste that as date, and we'll grab that and just copy those columns there. Just like that. Let's see if it works. If not, we might have to use a try cast. But there we have it. It's worked fine. 663 customers, valid from and valid to as dates. Very, very simple, very straightforward, and very common practice as well, to just strip dates out from date times in order for you to use them in queries going forward. That's pretty much it from the cast side of things. A lot to do with dates, which is great, but we've also seen that we can convert between strings and integers, etc. that we need to do. Next up then, we have the convert. Now convert is pretty much exactly the same thing as cast, but written in a slightly different way. And I think convert is quite an older methodology to cast. The cast is a bit newer, a bit simpler, but we've kept convert because it does allow you to do a variety of additional functionality within your conversions. As you can see, with convert, you simply put the data type you want to convert it to at the front, then put in a comma. Here's the field in the table we're going to be looking at, and then what we're going to do is we put in a little bit of code there after the second comma. Now you don't need to put in that code, but this little bit of code here designates a specific operation. So for example, if we convert valid from our customers table, as we've seen, into a date, that goes just fine when we cast it. Now, what if we wanted to see the date in different ways? Well, we're going to have to switch to convert. So this code here will produce the date as dots. This will bring the US date, and so on. Different codes bringing in different styles of date. And when we run off the code, you can see the results there. So here's our standard date as a date column, and then we have all these different types here. The US is month, day, and then year. UK, you've got the UK in dots, UK in dashes, etc., etc. It all depends how the person who's receiving the data wants to view their dates. Now we also have what's known as a date key. This is commonly used in data warehousing, where you've basically put the year, then the month, and then the day in there. And the good thing about this date key is, although it's converted it into a varchar, this can actually be then put in another column, which is of data type integer or bigger int, say in another table. So if you extracted this data, you want to then put this date key into a table where the date key column is an integer, and that will go straight in without any issues, because as you can see, that looks just like an integer. Another key thing for you to remember is that if I hover over the convert there, you see it returns a varchar. So these, they look like dates, but to SQL Server they are simply character strings. You see it's varchar there. When we cast as a date, then that's the actual date there. SQL Server will recognize this column as an actual date. This one, it'll only register them as character strings. So if you're going to do any date manipulation, for example, you want to find the difference in days between two dates, you need to make sure that your columns are a data type date and not any of these other sort of varchars, character strings, etc. Otherwise, either your data will fail or you'll start getting weird results. So just be wary of that all these different date formats are stored as varchars and not actual dates. So that's quite a lot of converts with regards to dates going on there. But what about converting between different other data types such as floats, integers, decimals, etc. Now, as we've seen, cast and convert are quite similar, and of course we can do a convert with just the data type we want to convert to, comma, and the column that we're going to use the data from to do that conversion. We don't need to put another code at the end here like we did above here. All this is going to do is convert tax amount into a float, pretty much exactly the same as this little cast statement here, and so on and so on with these different bits of code here. Let's run these off quickly and have a look at what's going on. So this was our original amount. It's to do to 2 decimal places. As you can see there, every value, whether it ends in 0055, it's to 2 decimal places, pretty much like you'd expect when dealing with any sort of finances or money. Now, casting to a float, all it does is it strips out any zeros at the end. So that looks like an integer because it stripped out those 2 zeros, but there's no zeros behind there, so it's 55. As you can see here, there's zeros on these 2 values, so all it's done is strip them out there. And our convert has done exactly the same thing. You can see these 2 values match all the way down the list. Now, if we wanted to convert it to an integer, which simply gets rid of all the decimal points, and you end up with full numbers there, there's no rounding or anything going on. As you can see, with the int cast or the convert, again, we end up with matching numbers there. Pretty easy. Now, if we want to check out casting as a decimal, so we're basically turning the quantity from the invoice lines as opposed to the tax amount, we're taking that quantity and converting it to a decimal. As you can see, it's managed to just find 2 decimal places. So here's the tax amount, sorry, that's the quantity. Let's put that in quickly to avoid confusion. As you can see, dodgy coding is all over the place, so we need to make sure that we are extra vigilant when we write our code. Here's the quantity in the original format, which is an integer. There we go. But we can convert that to a decimal as well. So 18 with a precision of 2. There you go. You've got your 2 decimal places. And it's just putting that with 2 decimal places on the end. All of these are 0 because it's converting from an integer. But our cast and our convert are producing exactly the same results there. Straightforward stuff. Very easy to cast and convert between 2 numbers, whether they're decimals, floats, integers, etc. Really easy to convert between the 2. Right then, that's pretty much a quick run through of the casting and the converting for you. So let's look at another slightly more complex example to really bring all these skills into play. So the scenario is, as a resident SQL expert on the Wide World Importers database, you've been seconded to the data warehouse team for a few weeks to help them out with some of the queries they are after. First up, they are looking to build an order table and have asked you to write a query to produce the following data. So there's quite a bit going on. We need the date key, and that will be based off the order date. So we had a date key example up above, check that out and follow suit with that. We'll bring in a whole lot of ID columns. As you can see there, we need the ordered quantity and the picked quantity as well. And then we need the line value, which, as we remember, is the quantity times the unit price. So we want that in full values only, no decimals at all for that one. We just want the full monetary value. And then we need picking completed date from there as well. So there could be quite a few casting and conversions going on there. So if you want to give that a try, remember you've got two different ways to do certain conversions there. Give that a try, and when you're ready, we can go through my answer. Fantastic. Let's start our query. So first thing, we need a customer ID, billing customer ID as well. So yeah, we've got our date key based off the order, but that's coming, the order details are slightly further down on the list. So what I'm going to do is bring in my customer first. Now it doesn't matter obviously what order you bring in your tables because it's all being inner joined. So it's not a problem how you go about doing this one. See, let's bring in our sales orders. Get a few details from that. We've done this lovely query many times, so it should be pretty straightforward to just hammer it out, get the basics in, and then we can work on what we need to do with all the conversions. And we need order quantity, pick quantity, etc. And that's from our ordered lines table. There we go. Shocked to find out I'm using L for that one. Let's get all our joins in first of all, and we're pretty much good to go to select all our columns. Now I don't think we need any more tables, but we'll see as we go through the list. So first up, we need to get our order date, which is from our order table. And we need to cast it as a date key. So up here, we have this bit of code here. So what we're going to do is just simply grab that and then get our order date and put it in there. So that is going to convert it to a date key. Pretty straightforward. Let's move on quickly. Customer ID, billing customer ID, and we're going to use the same naming convention that I've asked for up here. Order ID, that is from our order table or even our order lines, so that one goes in there. Very straightforward, very easy. Item ID, now where's that? From recollection, here we go, your stock item ID in there. So stock item directly as ID. There we go. Next one, ordered quantity. Bring that one in. And we've got our picked quantity as well. So quite a few things. That one we don't need to rename. That's a bonus. And then we've got our line value, which is our quantity multiplied by our unit price. And that will give us, let's have a look, unit price a decimal, quantity is integer. So we'll probably end up with a decimal. And of course, full value is only no decimals, so we can convert or cast as an int. Now of course, if you decided to use a convert instead, we would have written it like so. I'm going to call that line value 2, and then picking completed date. Last but not least, let's have a look at ordered lines again. Picking completed when. Pretty straightforward. That's just a date time 2 from the looks of it. I'm going to go for the easy option. And of course, I will supply the convert as well. And if you wanted to make it a fancy value, just put in a code there. Entirely up to you if you wanted to do it that way. And there we pretty much have it. Now there is also a picking completed when on the orders table, so it doesn't matter which one you've used in this situation. So that's pretty much it. Let's run the code off, see if it works first of all. And we've got our date key in the same manner as we had up here. We had our ID columns coming in, item ID, order quantity, pick quantity, then we had our line value, and we needed to make sure there were no decimal values, so it's just whole numbers in there. Same with our convert, with our cast there, and then our picking date converted into a date using any form here that you wish to use. We didn't even need to use this one, as it was converting it into a date as opposed to a varchar. It converted it, as you can see there. So that's it. How did you go with this? Pretty simple and straightforward. Build up your query, then do your conversions as you need to. There's a convert in there, a few casts, doesn't matter which ones you used, just as long as you got the same results in the end. And one last thing to mention before we leave is that along with the try cast, we can also put the try at the front of convert as well, and it'll have the exactly same effect, putting a null where it can't convert, but putting the actual value where it can. So that, everyone, wraps up this video. We've had a bit of fun converting between different data types, so join me in part 3 where we go over the isNull and the coalesce functions. Until then, everyone, I hope you all have a fantastic day.